And hello, we're back for the 9th of May and the 9th section of Night Watch by Terry Pratchett. Let's go. It was so very early in the morning that late at night wasn't quite over. White mist hung everywhere in the streets and deposited droplets like tiny pearls on Vimes's shirt as he prepared to break the law. If you stood on the roof of the privy behind the watch-house and steadied yourself on the drain pipe, one of the upstairs windows would bounce open if you hit it with the palm of your hand in exactly the right place. It was a useful bit of information, and Vimes wondered if he should pass it on to young Sam. Every honest copper ought to know how to break into his own neck. Tilden had limped home long ago, but Vimes did a quick sweep of his office, and it was with great satisfaction that he did not see what he hadn't expected to be there. Down below, a few of the more conscientious officers were signing off before heading home. He waited in the shadows until the door had banged shut for the last time, and there were no footsteps for several minutes. Then he made his way down the stairs and into the locker room. He'd been issued a key to his own locker, but still oiled the hinge from a small bottle before he opened it. He had not, in fact, put anything in there yet, but behold, there in a rumpled sack on the floor. He lifted it up. Well done, lads. Inside was Captain Tilden's silver inkwell. Vimes stood up and looked around at the lockers, with their ancient carved initials and occasional knife marks on the doors. He pulled from his pocket the little black cloth roll he'd taken from the evidence locker earlier. A selection of lockpicks glinted in the grey light. Vimes wasn't a genius with the hooks and rakes, but the cheap and worn door locks were hardly a major challenge. Really, it was just a matter of choosing. And afterward, he walked back through the mists. He was horrified to find he was feeling good again. It was a betrayal of Sybil and the future watch, and even of His Grace Sir Samuel Vimes, who had to think about the politics of distant countries and manpower requirements, and how to raise the damn boat that River Division kept sinking. And yes, he wanted to go back, or forward, or across, or whatever. He really did. He wanted to go home so much he could taste it. Of course he did. But he couldn't, not yet, and here he was. And as Dr. Lorne said, you did the job. And currently the job involved survival on the street in the game of silly buggers, and Vimes knew all about that game. Oh, yes. And there was a thrill in it. It was the nature of the beast. And thus he was walking along, lost in thought, when the men jumped him out of the mouth of a shadowy alley. The first one got a foot in the stomach because the beast does not fight fair. Vimes stepped aside and grabbed the other one. He felt the knife skitter across his breastplate as he lowered his head and tugged the man hard into the helmet. The man folded up quite neatly on the cobbles. Vimes spun around to the first man, who was bent almost double and wheezing, but had nevertheless kept hold of his knife, which he waved around in front of him like some kind of talisman. The point made erratic figure-eights in the air. "Drop it," said Vimes. "I won't ask again." He sighed and pulled a short object out of his back pocket. It was black and tapered and made out of leather filled with lead shot. He banned them from the modern watch, but he knew some officers had acquired them, and if he judged that man to be sensible, then he didn't know they'd got them. Sometimes an argument had to be ended quickly, and there were worse alternatives. He brought the blackjack down on the man's arm with a certain amount of care. There was a whimper, and the knife bounced off the cobbles. "We'll leave your chum to sleep it off," he said, "but you are coming to see the doctor, Henry. Are you coming quietly?" A few minutes later Dr. Lorne opened his back door, and Vimes brushed past, the body over his shoulders. "You minister to all sorts, right?" said Vimes. "Within reason, but—" "This one's an unmentionable," said Vimes. "Tried to kill me. Needs some medicine." "Why is he unconscious?" said the doctor. He was wearing a huge rubber apron and rubber boots. "Didn't want to take his medicine." Lorne sighed, and with a hand that held a mop, he waved Vimes towards the inner door. "Bring him right into the surgery," he said. "I'm afraid I'm cleaning up after Mr. Salsiferous in the waiting room." "Why, what did he do?" "He burst." Vimes, his natural inquisitiveness suddenly curbed, carried the body into Lorne's inner sanctum. It looked little different from when Vimes had last seen it, but then he'd barely been capable of taking in details. There was the table and a workbench, and all along one wall were racks of bottles. No two bottles were the same size. In one or two of them, things floated. On another wall were the instruments. "When I die," said Lorne, inspecting the patient, "I'm going to instruct them to put a bell on my tombstone, just so as I can have the pleasure of not getting up when people ring." I completely agree with that sentiment, by the way. "Put him down, please. Looks like concussion." "That was me hitting him," said Vimes helpfully. "You broke his arm too?" "That's right." "You made a very neat job of it. Easy to set and plaster him up." "Is there something wrong?" Vimes was staring at the instruments. "You use all these?" he said. "Yes. Some of them are experimental, though," said Lorne, busying himself at the work table. "Well, I'd hate for you to use this one on me," said Vimes, picking up a strange instrument like a couple of paddles tied with string. Lorne sighed. "Sergeant, there are no circumstances where the things you're holding could possibly be used on you," he said, his hands working busily. "They are of a feminine nature." "For the seamstresses?" said Vimes, putting the pliers down in a hurry. "Those things? No. The ladies of the night take pride these days in never requiring that sort of thing. My work with them is more of, shall we say, a preventative nature. Teaching them to use thimbles, that sort of thing. Yes, it's amazing how far you can push a metaphor, isn't it?" Vimes prodded the paddles again. They were quite alarming. "You're married, Sergeant," said Lorne. "Was Rosie right?" Yes. My wife is, elsewhere, though." He picked the things up and dropped them hastily again, with a clatter. "Well, it's just as well to be aware that giving birth isn't like shelling peas," said the doctor. "I should bloody well hope not!" "Although I have to say that the midwives seldom refer anything to me. They say men shouldn't fish around where they don't belong. Really, we may as well be living in caves." Lorne looked down at his patient. "In the words of the philosopher Septum, the founder of my profession, am I going to get paid for this?" Vimes investigated the money bag at the man's belt. "Will $6 do it?" he said. "Why would the unmentionables attack you, Sergeant? You're a policeman." "I am, but they aren't. Don't you know about them?" "I've patched up a few of their guests, yes," said Lorne, and Vimes noted the caution. It didn't pay to know too much in this town. People with curious dislocations, hot wax burns, that sort of thing. "Well, I had a little brush with Captain Swing last night," said Vimes, "and he was polite as hell to me about it, but I bet my boots he knows this lad and his friend came after me. That's his style. He probably wanted to see what I'd do." "He's not the only one interested in you," said Lorne. "I got a message that Rosie Palm wants to see you. Well, I assume she meant you. That ungrateful bastard was the actual term she used." "I think I owe her some money," said Vimes, "but I've no idea how much." "Don't ask me," said Lamb. Lamb? There's a typo in here. Lorne, smoothing the plaster with his hand. "She generally names her price up front." "I mean the finder's fee, or whatever it was." "Yes, I know. Can't help you there, I'm afraid," said Lorne. Vimes watched him working for a while and said, "Know anything about Miss Batty?" "The seamstress? She hasn't been here long." "And she's really a seamstress." "For the sake of precision," said Dr. Lorne, "let us say she's a needlewoman. Apparently she heard there was a lot of work for seamstresses in the big city, and had one or two amusing misunderstandings before someone told her exactly what that meant. One of them involved me removing a crochet hook from a man's ear last week. Now she just hangs out with the rest of the girls." Why? Because she's making a fortune, that's why. Hasn't it ever occurred to you, Sergeant, that sometimes people go to a massage parlour for a real massage? For example, there's ladies all over this city with discreet signs up that say things like, "Trousers repaired while you wait." And that's the aforementioned bell that they're going to hang by my tombstone. I'll be back.